All right, so out of respect for everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, again, thank you all for tuning in tonight to the virtual FAFSA workshop that we're going to be holding and as a part of our college kickoff series 2.0. And so, again, welcome. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day. We hope that you gain some useful information that'll help you as you complete the FAFSA or prepare for college or prepare to do the FAFSA next year. And I also want to shout out our community partners that made this possible. My name is Brandy Kennedy, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Student Outreach and Post-Secondary Access with Sayeds Guilford. And we also have the Carolina College Advising Corps and on the behalf of Guilford County School. And we have our other guests here, and I'll let them introduce themselves briefly.
I do want to say good evening to everyone. My name is Tequila Barnes Hall. I'm your regional representative for College Foundation of North Carolina. So thank you so much for joining.
Hi, and I'm Deborah Slade. I'm the Assistant Director for Outreach in the Financial Aid Office at UNC Greensboro. And just want to echo the welcome for joining us tonight. And we hope you're going to get some valuable information that will help you in the process.
Everyone, and I'm Warshay Downey. We're so elated to have you. I'm from Say Yes Guilford, Senior Director of Data and Post-Secondary Success. And again, we are so elated that you have joined us this evening.
All right. And so our other community partners are here in spirit, but they were definitely a part of this process. So thank you all. Um, and so just to go over some quick etiquette before turning it over to our guests, we ask that you mute yourselves as you enter the meeting. You will recognize that you are muted. And if you do have a question, we ask that you either um, place it in the chat or just keep it to the end. We will have an opportunity for you to ask some questions. And lastly, if you fail to abide by any of these expectations or say anything that is inappropriate, whether that is in the chat or out loud, then you will be removed. You know, this is an opportunity for all of us to gain resources that'll help us get to our next step and prepare for college. And so I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Slade from UNCG Financial Aid. We are very thankful to have her here this evening, and I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
Well, thank you, everyone. And it's so good to see all these faces out here. So as we start out, I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides that hopefully will help you get through the process. Feel free to take screenshots if you need to. I think Brandy is recording this, so we'll be able to, you should be able to see this later as we go through this. First of all, if you've not done the FAFSA, we want to encourage you to do it. If you have done it, wonderful, congratulations, but still stick around. There's still some additional information that might prove helpful for you. But I just want to start off with, why is it important to file the FAFSA? Now, don't anybody panic. I'm not going to read all these slides to you, okay? Because I'm just not going to do that. But it is important that you file the FAFSA because that is your gateway to a myriad of aid programs, specifically the federal aid programs, such as the federal Pell Grant, work study, student loan programs, and parents, if you're planning to borrow money on behalf of your student, you'll need to make sure that your student has completed a FAFSA in order to take advantage of that type of program. Also, many schools use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for their school-based aid. And states use this application for eligibility for the state-funded programs. Now, there are a lot of different programs. These are just a few of the ones that you may encounter as you're going through the process. Again, depending on the type of school that you're attending, some or one or two of these may be offered to you. So you want to make sure that you file the FAFSA because you don't want to miss out on any opportunity. And then that leads us into this. Why should you file a FAFSA? Well, not filing the FAFSA means that you're just leaving money on the table. It means you're lowering your opportunity to have assistance to pay for college. And each year, billions of dollars go unclaimed because people simply don't take time to do this, or they think it's too hard. It's not too hard. There's lots of help available, as you can see here tonight. Your community partners are coming together to provide this information. All of the schools that you are even considering attending have financial aid offices that are more than happy to help you with the process. So please make sure that you don't put off doing this. Make sure you ask for help if you need it. And keep this in mind too, this is a free application. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So you don't want to ever pay anybody to help you do this. As I said before, all of this information and all of this assistance is free. You can call or email different resources to get help with this. And you just want to make sure that you're doing it. So a lot of times people want to know, why do you have to provide all this information? Why are they asking all of these seemingly intrusive questions? Well, you all know that in any time you're requesting aid from any type of official office, they want some information to make sure that you can, first of all, be eligible for the aid, and also determine how much you can receive. So that's why these questions are being asked. It's not to pry or to try to trip anyone up, but again, it's just a gauge to determine what types of financial aid you can receive and how much. So getting started, if you go to studentaid.gov, you'll see this application process timeline here. So you want to get prepared, make sure you have everything you need to start the application. You want to go ahead and get it done, review the report that comes back, and I'll talk about that in just a bit. When you get aid, you make sure that you're responding to it. And then further on down the process, you'll actually receive the aid when you get into your chosen school. And then you start the process all over again, because it is a yearly process. It's not a one-time deal. You will need to make sure that you complete this application every year that you want to get aid. And particularly if you want to make sure that you're filing early. So let's talk about getting prepared. So there are going to be some things that you need to do. You'll need a FSA ID, or Federal Student Aid ID. Parents, you will need this as well, because you will be providing information on the FAFSA, and you'll also need a signature, and your FSA ID acts as your electronic signature. And that's also going to be helpful as you go through the process in maybe applying for loans or other or accessing other federal websites. For the 2021-2022 academic year, which will start in August or this fall of 2021, you will need to provide your 2019 tax and income information on the FAFSA. You will need your Social Security number for both student and parent, driver's license number. If you have one, don't run out and get a driver's license. If you don't already have it, it's not required. But if you do have one, you need to provide that. If you are an eligible non-citizen, you will also need your alien registration number, and you'll need other records of untaxed income, such as child support, and then asset information, for example, the amount in your bank account, your cash, savings, investments, and that kind of thing. Now, when we're talking about investments, we're not talking about the value of your permanent residence of your home. It's only for let's say stocks and bonds and those kinds of investments. So I mentioned the Federal Student Aid ID. This is, again, is your username and password that you can use to electronically sign not only the FAFSA, but loan documents. It also gains you access, and it's for the students, to the website that gives you your financial aid history, so you can see all of your the amount of loans that you've received, the amount of federal grants that you've received. So there are lots of places that this ID is required. So you want to make sure that you guard this. This is linked to your Social Security number and your date of birth. So it is vitally important that you guard this, because someone could impersonate you if they had this piece of information. So you want to make sure you don't share that with anyone. As I mentioned, that parents would need to use this if they're planning to apply for the parent loan. This is the application for the parent loan is at the studentaid.gov website. So you have to log in with your FSA ID. And I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of you. So don't worry about that. We're going to talk about some of the loans, and we'll give you time for questions at the end as well. So next we want to talk about how you set up the FSA ID, because there are some specific things that you need to make sure you have in place. You have to create a username, but don't use personal information. Don't use anything that's easy to guess. Each parent, the parent and the student will each need to use a separate ID. So you can't, separate email when you're setting up the ID. You can't use the same email address. You also need your social security number, your name and date of birth, and all of that's going to be used to verify your identity. And you have to use your legal name as it appears on your social security card. So if you got a nickname or you shorten your name, make sure you don't use that. Use your legal name so that it does match up correctly, because they will do some matching to the social security database. One of the things that you'll want to make sure you do to, in the event that you get locked out of your account, or if you need to reset your password, you want to set up some challenge questions. And that will help you in the event you have to go back into the site to get that reset. One of the other ways that you can do that speed up getting your password reset or your account unlocked is to verify your email address and your mobile phone number. So you want to load that in so that in the event that happens, you can get a text message or an email that will guide you through resetting your password or unlocking your account. The FAFSA also has a mobile app. So that's the easiest way to do that. Students, you can download that to your phone. You can log in with your FSA ID and go ahead and get the application started. Then you can use a save key to save the information before you submit it if you need to come back in to do some things. And then you can also share that save key with your parents, and they can go in and add their information as well. I mentioned that you'll need to use your 2019 tax return. And what we encourage you to do is to use the data retrieval tool. Now, this is a process within the FAFSA that allows you to have your tax and income information imported directly from the IRS database. Now, this is the tax return that was filed last year, that was due on last April. So you should have that information available. Again, it's easier if you can use a data retrieval tool. And that way you don't have to worry about trying to find those tax documents. Now, once you use the data retrieval tool, don't panic. If you use that, you won't see the information that's transferred into the FAFSA. You'll see a note that says successfully transferred from the IRS. That, again, is a mechanism that the IRS and FAFSA is using to protect your identity, to protect your information, and that will allow us to get the information securely. But if someone should happen to get a hold of your information, they won't be able to see that tax information. Other types of income I mentioned before, you need to report will be child support received or any living or housing allowances. For example, if you're someone who may be in ministry, if you're being provided housing or living allowances, that would need to be added onto the FAFSA, as well as any workers' compensation or disability benefits. And earlier I mentioned assets, such as your cash, checking, and your bank account information. Don't include any retirement benefits either. So that does not get included. Sometimes people will want to include the value of their 401s or the value of their retirement accounts. So you don't want to put that in. That is not counted on the FAFSA. So if you were getting a little nervous about that, just remember that's not counted. So now you're almost ready to get started. So you've gotten your FSA ID for students. So what you'll want to do is log on to the, go to studentaid.gov, click on the link to complete the FAFSA form, and then you'll get this login screen. Now, this is the very first time that you're completing the FAFSA. You'll click the top link that says start here under new to the FAFSA process. And when you log in, you'll be prompted to identify yourself as either the student or the parent. If you're the student, then you would enter your UNCG. See, I've got UNCG on the brain. Enter in your FSA ID. If you are the parent, you will not use your FSA ID at this point. If you want to go in to get some information started for your student or to enter your information, you will click on the link that says I'm a parent, and then you'll be prompted to enter information about your student, such as their student's date of birth and their social security number, so that you can access the form. At the proper time, you will be prompted for your FSA ID when you get to the signature portion, but you will not log in using your parent FSA ID on this, okay? So one of the biggest questions that we get sometimes has to do with, am I independent or dependent? Because that will determine how much information is provided on the FAFSA, or whether or not you need to provide your parents' information. Typically, students are dependent, but there are some situations where a student may be independent. So I've expanded that screen a little bit. So if you can answer yes to any one of these questions, then you would be considered independent. But if you have to answer no to all of these questions, then you are considered a dependent student, and you would need to provide your parents' information on the FAFSA. So I know I went through that a little quickly. Let me go back and let you look at the questions. So the first one has to do with your age. So if you were born before January 1st, 1998, then you would be considered an independent student. If you're married, if you're working on a master's degree, so students right out of high school are not working on a master's degree, you're working on a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. So therefore, this question would be no for you. Now, if you do have children that you support, then of course you can answer yes to that. You may be asked to provide some supporting documentation for that to the school, not to FAFSA. And as you go through these other questions, you can, they're fairly self-explanatory. Some of them, as I said before, you may have to provide documentation to the school if you answer yes to those, because they do need to verify this. Now, this number 9 is one that we sometimes get students answering that, because it can be confusion involved here. Guardianship has a specific legal definition. So if you live with another relative, if they have not gone to court and been awarded guardianship of you in a court of law and there are documents to support that, then you would answer no to this question as it relates to guardianship. And again, any of these questions that pose a problem for you, or if they're not clear as they relate to your specific situation, just give a call to a financial aid office and we can help you kind of work through that to make sure you're answering these questions appropriately. The other question that we get a lot is, who is my parent on the FAFSA? Because this is important, and it's sometimes can be, again, one of those confusing issues, especially in the case of blended families. Or parents who may be separated or divorced. The question about who gets added on the FAFSA can be a little bit daunting. This graphic is really, really good to break down and explain who is the parent for FAFSA purposes. So in a nutshell, if your legal parents, your biological and or adopted parents, or they've been deemed your parent, they're listed on your birth certificate if you're adopted. If they're married to each other, answer the question about both of them, regardless of whether your parents are same or opposite sex. If your legal parents are not married to each other and live together, then you would provide information about both parents. If your legal parent is widowed or was never married, you would answer the question about that particular parent. Now, this is just a very brief overview, a very brief synopsis of this. There's other scenarios, of course, if you have step parents, and if your biological parent has remarried and that's the parent that you live with, and you would report information for the biological parent that you live with and their spouse. So again, this can be one of those confusing issues on the FAFSA, but once again, the financial aid offices are more than happy to help you work through that. I encourage you to go back onto studentaid.gov and look at this link. I have provided a PDF copy of the slides with a link to all of the websites and documents that are in these in this presentation. So feel free to reach out to on the Say Yes organization for a copy of that, or to Tequila at CFNC, or to me at the financial aid office at UNC Greensboro. We can make sure you get a copy of that so you can get this information. So the top errors that we've seen on the FAFSA, and this is from the financial aid office point of view. I'm sure others have seen different errors or maybe some of the same, but the number one error that we see people making is filing late. The application opens on October 1st of the year before you start school. Now that seems like a long time, and you think, well, I've got plenty of time, because if school doesn't start to August of 2021 and the FAFSA opened up August of 2020, October of 2020, I've got plenty of time. Well, no, you don't. I encourage you to file as early as possible, because once your application is in the financial aid office and once you've been admitted to school, when the financial aid offices start offering awards or offering money, if yours is not there, you may miss out. And the later you file, the less your chances are of getting the full complement of aid that you may have been eligible for, but the money may have already run out. So file early. Also, filing early helps us catch errors, and we can get those corrected so that you are getting the right types and amounts of aid that you should be eligible for. The other errors, and I'll just go down the list here, not finishing if your parents don't have a Social Security number. The FAFSA requires that the student who's applying be either a citizen or an eligible non-citizen with a Social Security number, but that doesn't mean that your parent has to have one. If your parent does not have a Social Security number, you would just simply enter all zeros for that parent, okay? So don't panic, go ahead and do it, go ahead and finish it. And again, if you find yourself in a situation where this is not clear or you're not quite sure what to put in, give us a call. Not answering the questions based on when, and that when it is asking, and that can seem confusing too, because the FAFSA is asking you questions based on a range of timeframes. For example, I said that they are asking for your tax information from 2019, which is a couple of years ago, but they're asking what your educational plans are for the upcoming academic year. But then when they are asking you about your personal information, such as your date of birth, or where do you live, what is your marital status, they're asking about it as of right now at the time that you're completing the FAFSA. So there can be a little bit of confusion there. Again, just work it out. And again, I keep saying this and repeating myself, but if you are at all unsure, give someone a call. Adding incorrect household members or not adding in the correct household members. The FAFSA will ask how many people are living in your household. And this should include you, your parent or parents, your siblings, if they are under 24 and in school, your other relatives who may live with you may not be appropriate to list on the FAFSA unless your family, your parents are supporting them monetarily, providing more than half of their support. So make sure that you're working that out and you're going through that process of thinking about that. Not adding school codes. A lot of times students file the FAFSA and don't add any schools. You have to add a school in order for them to get your information. So if you're planning to attend, say UNC Wilmington, UNC Chapel Hill, UNC Greensboro, or North Carolina A&T, or Winston-Salem State, you have to list them on the FAFSA in order for them to get your information. And that way they can get your information, determine what types of aid you can get once you get admitted to their school. And they can let you know how much you have to support your year in college. But if they're not listed and you get admitted to that school, they still can't offer you aid until they get your FAFSA. So it's easy enough to just do it right up front. You can add up to 10 schools on the FAFSA without worrying about that. If you need to add another school later, you can go back to studentaid.gov, click on the returning to FAFSA button and add more schools. That's okay, you can do that. Okay. So not checking your student aid report. Now that's once you've completed your FAFSA and you listed all of the information and you hit submit, you will get what's called a student aid report. That's a summary of all of the information that you provided on the FAFSA, as well as a breakdown of what your eligibility might entail for federal aid. Now, it won't tell you how much you're going to get from each individual school, but it will tell you what you may be eligible for in the form of federal aid. So you want to make sure you're checking your FAFSA correctly to make sure that everything was entered accurately. Just go through the list, look at everything. If you see something that's not right, then you can always go back onto studentaid.gov and correct it and make sure that it is correct. The last one is not asking for help. That is one of, next to not filing and filing late. That is one of the biggest things that we see happening. A lot of times people will go through the process, not ask for help. If we don't know that you've made a mistake and put in the wrong numbers, or maybe didn't put it in the right place, or you don't do it because you're not sure of how to do something, then you're missing out and you're not getting the aid that you should be getting. I mentioned the student aid report. This is a sample of what it would look like. You'll see in the top corner, the expected family contribution. This is the number that is going to determine, that's an index that schools will use to determine how much need-based aid you can get. It also tells you whether or not you have anything else that you need to do in the application status. It tells you whether there's a missing or incomplete information. It also tells you if you've been selected for verification. Now, this is a process where the schools will look at your information, ask you to submit tax documents or other documents to verify that the information that was submitted on the FAFSA was accurate. Doesn't mean that you did something wrong. Doesn't mean that somebody thinks that you're trying to cheat. It just means that randomly students files get selected for verification randomly, and that way they are able to verify just to make sure all of the information is correct. You can also see all of the schools, and this screenshot does not show you, but you can see all of the schools that you've listed, and you can list any school that you like. Once you go in, there's a way when you, at the beginning of the FAFSA process, there is a section that asks which schools you want to list, and you can look them up. If you know the school code, you can just enter the school code, and most schools have their school code on their website. So you can go to the financial aid office of the schools that you're considering attending, find their Title IV school code, list it on the FAFSA, and then they will be sure to get your information. So it doesn't matter, it can be any school. I saw a question pop up about out-of-state schools. So it doesn't matter if you want to go to a school in Virginia or in Maryland or in Pennsylvania or California, just look up the school, get their Title IV school code, and add it onto your FAFSA. So let's see, where's my next question here, my next slide here. So what do you do after you file the FAFSA? Well, that may not be the last step. You may need to submit your signature pages if you're not able to use the FSA ID. Now, parents who do not have a Social Security number will not be able to get an FSA ID. So they will need to print out a signature page and sign it and mail that to the FAFSA processing center. And the address is on the page. For verification, I mentioned before, you may be required to or requested to send in tax documents. In addition to verification, you may also be the school may request that you submit citizenship documents, such as your birth certificate or passport or certificate of naturalization. They may ask you for selective service. Now, the reason that you would get citizenship or selective service requests for information is because the FAFSA was not able to match that information in the database. They usually do that matching on the front end. But if they're not able to find a match for you, or then the schools are required to get that information from you to verify that you've met that requirement, and then we can process the application for you. So you may get a SAR student aid report in the mail. You certainly will get an email confirming that your FAFSA application has been submitted correctly or submitted successfully. I won't say correctly, successfully. And the last thing on his special circumstances, I don't know, any of y'all remember 2020? Yeah, it was interesting. And remember, we're asking for information from your 2019 income. So pretty much everyone has been impacted by the pandemic. And we know that there's some folk who've been impacted even more. There've been loss of income, certainly shifts in income. So those kinds of things can be relayed to the financial aid office of the schools that you're attending. Don't change your FAFSA to match your current information. Provide the information that's requested on the FAFSA. So if they want your 2019 tax information, put your 2019 tax information. Anything beyond that, you will be communicating directly with the financial aid office of the school that you're going to be attending, and they will help you go through that process. You simply just let them know that something is different. You will definitely want to make sure that you provide documentation of that. So for example, if you've lost a job, there should be some communication from you and your employer, either a layoff notification, or even if you apply for unemployment benefits, your initial application for unemployment benefits can, again, document your loss of income because it will have the date that you last worked. If there are medical issues, you definitely would have medical documentation for those kinds of things. So make sure you keep those things in a folder so that if you need to turn those in, or if you need to provide that information to the school, you can do that. Now, I know you're wanting, okay, well, when do I find out about the money? Show me the money. Well, most of the time, most schools will start offering students financial aid, A, after you've been admitted, and B, usually it's going to be in the spring. So this is the time of the year we're starting to get to that point. There are lots of things that have to happen in the background. We have to look at budgets to see how much money is available. We have to also, for North Carolina based aid, we have to wait until we get the funding allocations from the state to make sure that we know how much we can award. So that process typically begins in late March, early April, and schools will be notifying you. Some schools will send you a letter in the mail with your award information on it. Some will send you an email, but we're going to talk more about that next month. So I want you to put that on your calendar, and I'm sure Warshay and Brandy will to give you more information about that session. But just keep that in mind. So we won't talk about that right now. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but just don't expect something immediately after you file your FAFSA. You won't get an award letter in the mail the next day, okay? All right, so what you can be doing is looking for scholarships. Beat the bushes, turn over rocks, do whatever you have to do to find scholarships. Work with your college advisors, work with your high school counselors, look on cfnc.org, look everywhere you can for scholarships, for private scholarships, and apply for those. So you want to make sure that you're not leaving anything off the table. You want to make sure that you are maximizing your opportunities. You can find private scholarships, databases that will allow you to search for free. Probably the easiest and best way to do this is to set up a profile for the types of maybe your major or hobbies or whatever you have in mind, and then they will do the search for you. They will search for different types of scholarships that you might apply for. They'll send you a list and say, hey, you might qualify for these scholarships, but you will still have to do the application. If there's an essay, you'll still have to do that. You'll have to follow through on it, but all of these would be free. Again, just like with the FAFSA, do not pay anyone to do a scholarship search for you. Do not pay for a scholarship. Scholarship is free money. So why would you pay somebody to give you free money? Okay. Yeah, just saying. All right. One of the things that I also wanted to make sure we covered tonight was contacting the financial aid offices at the schools that you're planning to attend to get more information. typically you're going to get some type of communication from them. It's usually going to be in the form of an email. So make sure you read the email carefully. Don't just read the title and the first paragraph. Read through everything and make sure that you understand what the email says. Follow instructions. There may be instructions in there on how to get more information or how to see your file or what you need to do to turn in more information. Now, if you don't understand something, make a list of your questions, then call or email the school. And if you have been admitted to that school, typically you will have been assigned an ID number that is specific for that school. So if you send an email, make sure you include your full name and that school ID. Do not send your social security number in an email, okay? So make sure you put your full name, your school assigned ID in the email to that particular school and ask your question. Then make sure you write down or retain the answers because that might come in handy later on down the road. So that way you can make sure that you're keeping up with everything. Pay attention to deadlines. If there's a deadline in that email that says you need to return something by a specific date, make sure you adhere to that. Don't wait until the last minute. Okay, so make sure that you are following through, that you are sending everything that they need. If you have to put a reminder on your calendar or your phone, make sure you do that, okay? The first weeks of the semester are typically the busiest for every financial aid office that I know. Usually the first couple of weeks before the beginning of the semester, and certainly the first 2 or 3 weeks of the semester. So my advice is don't try to call at that time. Now, if you're an incoming student for next fall, this is a good time to start contacting the financial aid offices, okay? So if you're getting messages that you need to provide additional information, yeah, go ahead and call, go ahead and email. Again, make sure you're entering all of the information, that your questions are clear and that you are using your UNCG, here we go again with the UNCG, your student ID. So make sure that you're doing that. Now, if you call at the beginning of the semester, I'm going to tell you, the phones are going to be busy. You may have to wait. It may take longer for them to respond to your email. So do your calling and your inquiries now while it's not quite so busy. At any time, Monday's always bad and lunch hours are bad. So try to call at other times. Try to use the school's website to get most of your general questions answered. And if that does not fully answer your question, you certainly want to make sure that you follow through with a clear, concise question. A lot of schools will refer students to a student online portal. They'll provide you information and directions on how to access that information. So there again is another place where you can find lots of information about the status of your application with that school. If you want to visit the school, please call first to make sure that you how visits are handled. For example, at UNCG, we require an appointment, so no walk-ins. So if you don't just drive over because of some of our restrictions and health and safety measures are in place, so we require that you provide that you at least ask for an appointment. And you can come in person. You can also have a virtual appointment. We can set up a Zoom appointment for you, and we can make sure that you get your questions answered. Again, I'm being repetitive here, but it's so important. Make sure you ask questions, but then write down the answers to the questions. Definitely pay attention to deadlines. Now, parents and students, this last one, communicate. This is for you to communicate with each other. You're going into this together, so make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Don't one person try to do it all. So parents, don't go in and try to do the whole FAFSA for your student. Don't try to do all of their scholarship applications, because ultimately this is the student's form. When you go into the FAFSA, the questions are being asked of the student. So the answers are coming from the student, except for the parent section. So make sure that you guys are on board with this, that you're partnering up, that you're sharing the responsibility, you're sharing the information so that everybody knows what's going on. Set up an email, especially for scholarship searches and financial aid information. And if you're going to be communicating with a school or a professional organization, such as a scholarship committee, try to set up a really an email address that you're not going to be ashamed of when you start your master's program. Okay, just saying. Keep all of the documents that you use to complete the FAFSA. You may have to provide copies of those to the financial aid office. And I would suggest keeping those separate by school, just so that you know, correspondences and letters from each school, keep those in a separate file so that you know what school is, what information goes with what school, what questions you need to ask directly to each school. And as we'll talk about on the March session, each school's award offer will be unique to that school. So it's very rare that you will get the exact same award offer from every school. So keep that in mind. And typically aid does not transfer, but like I said, we'll talk more about that next time. Make sure you attend all the events that people are offering on open houses, FAFSA events like this, so that you can get as much information as possible. And I always encourage people to learn how to manage your money, because you're going to be going off to school on your own. And if you know how to manage your money, you're going to make so much better student, and you're going to make better decisions as well. Tips for juniors and seniors. I saw somebody in the chat list a question about, if you're junior, what do you do? Well, right now, if you're a sophomore or a junior, or the parent of a sophomore or junior, one of the things that they can be doing right now is just making sure they're focused on their academics, making sure they're taking the courses that are going to be required to get admitted, and that will be required to qualify for certain scholarships. And then start scholarship searches. It's not too early to start looking for scholarships. You can determine what's out there, make a list, and make sure, and the dates that they open and the deadlines, and make sure that you go back and follow through on that. Again, same thing with for them, attend open house events, and do virtual campus tours, and learn how to manage your finances. I'm not going to go through all of these resources. Those resources are available on the handout, and you can definitely take a look at that. If you have military affiliation, make sure you're following through on getting information about military benefits that might be available, as well as vocational rehabilitation benefits. And y'all, I'm done. That's all my slides. I do see there was one question in here that was directed to me specifically, and I wanted to address that. It doesn't matter what college you want to go to. If you want to go to a college in any city, any state, you can list that school on your FAFSA, okay? So don't panic about that. You can list that. And the other question was, when was the last day to register for FAFSA? Well, here's the trick. The FAFSA opens on October 1st of, let's just use this current year. So for students who are going to be entering college August of 2021, the FAFSA for the 2022 academic year opened October 1st of 2020, last October. It can be filed through June of 2022. But you don't want to wait that long to do it, because you will have missed a whole academic year. So do it now. Don't wait. Do it right now. Thank you, Orshay and Tequila and Brandy, for grabbing those questions. Was there anything else? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can get back to the session. And Brandy, if you had anything, or if there were other questions, did everybody get their questions answered?
Yeah, there was another question in regard to who is my parent on the FAFSA. Someone had a scenario. We share slide 14, and there's also a link, but you may have a recommendation as to, they were asking about, trying to pull it up, it's in yeah. So they're saying their grandparents who have sole legal and physical custody, care, and control by the court, who is the student considered independent? And one parent is
I was trying to
deceased.
see if I could find that link on the FAFSA, but on the FAFSA website, but I'm not able to find it.
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat. Hopefully that's
Okay.
helpful, or they can
Yeah.
refer
Well,
to the financial aid office.
if, again, the guardianship has a specific legal definition, which means that someone has gone to court, petitioned the court for guardianship of the child, and the parent's rights as a parent have been severed. The parent no longer has those rights. That's different from custody. Custody means that someone has been granted authority to care and house and provide care and support for that child, but the parent still is the legal parent and legally responsible for the child. So I don't know if I'm answering that question to the degree of the situation, but rule of thumb is if someone has gone to court and they have a court document that says that the biological parents are no longer responsible for the child, and these people, the person who has petitioned the court for the right to act as their parent is now the new guardian, then that student can answer yes to the question, do you have a legal guardian? And in that scenario, they definitely would be considered independent and not have to provide parent information. So I think I made that probably as clear as mud, but.
That's what a parent said, thank you. So.
Okay, all right.
Someone asked, will we talk about say yes? Sure. Waiting for. Well, yeah. So Ms. Slade mentioned additional scholarship resources, and we won't do information session here, but we will direct you to, Brandy's going to put it up on the screen. As you know, Say Yes registration opened October 1st of your senior year. You can go to sayyesguilford.org to complete the registration, and you have until June 1st to complete your registration and indicate what college you should enroll in. We're also going to drop a link into the chat. We have an amalgamation of resources. That's my word today, amalgamation. But we have video resources and webinar recordings that we're going to drop the link right now. And then Brandy probably have more details she want to share with you as well about that Say Yes scholarship, of course, and some other upcoming events.
Thank you, Warshay. Yes, so thank you, Ms. Slade, for your presentation, and I hope that everyone got some information from that they could take back. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us. We really wanted to highlight Say Yes Guilford tonight because one of our requirements for this scholarship, Ms. Slade talked about scholarships that can help you cover that cost of college. So Say Yes Guilford is a scholarship, and it's the organization here in Guilford County that works to support you from kindergarten to career. And so we do provide scholarships and in lieu of other support services and resources that are available to you. And so if you are a senior or if you are graduating this year, so I know there are a few of you joining in from the early colleges. So if you will be attending college next fall, then or next spring, then we ask that you do your registration. It did open October 1st, just like the FAFSA, but our deadline is June 1st of 2021. But don't wait to the last minute. Even if you don't know exactly where you're going to school yet, you can go back in and you have to update that information by June 1st. But we ask that you do that. Again, this is an opportunity to get money to support your tuition. And with that being said, we thank you all for tuning in today, and we want you all to come back and to continue hearing about this series and the college kickoff series. So today you learned about the FAFSA, and so I know that we have a variety of juniors, seniors, and families on here. Our next webinar next Thursday will be about now that you're accepted to college, like what do I do? Like how do I compare my different choices? I got accepted to A&T, GTCC. COVID still going on, like how do I weigh the benefits and costs associated with college? And so feel free to join that webinar, as well as the It's Not Too Late. So don't feel bad if you haven't gotten started on your FAFSA yet. This is a great time to get started because as Ms. Slate mentioned, some schools have priority deadlines where it will maximize your chance to get funding. And you don't want to miss out on those opportunities. So feel free to register at sayyesguilford.org/college kickoff series. And Tequila, did you want to add anything?
I think she's muted.
Yeah.
I'm trying
Okay,
to.
there
Okay.
we go. Thank you. No, I think Everyone did a great job. Just make sure you're coming back. We have some amazing things, like Brandy said, to share with you. And tell some other people that were not able to join tonight about the amazing time that you had, and invite them to join us next time as well.
So thank you all again for tuning in tonight. We hope that we see you next week. If you all have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. This session will be available on our Say Yes Guilford YouTube playlist within the next day or two. And we do have that PDF that Miss Slade mentioned. So feel free to I believe it was placed in the chat, but we will also feel free to reach out to us via email, um, or we can place that on social media for you to post and repost and share with your friends.
Brandy, I see one question that has been repeated, and I do want to go back and someone's asking for clarification on qualified retirement accounts if they must be reported on the FAFSA. And no, they do not. The total of your retirement account does not have to be reported on the FAFSA. I think the question that may be coming up and what may be causing some confusion is untaxed retirement benefits. And that may be, for example, if you're receiving a payout from your retirement, that may be part of that. Or if you received a lump sum payment and that was listed on your tax return, there's part or some of it may not have been taxed. So that could be it. But in general, you do not have to report the total of your IRA, the total of your 401k, or any of your retirement accounts. So not the total. You may have to report, as I said, any actual payouts from the accounts, but not the total of those. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. Okay, thanks. All right, good, Steve. I'm glad I made sense on something. All right. But again, as Brandy and Shay said, please don't hesitate to call us. We're more than happy to help answer some of these questions. And I know I went through all of that a little quickly, but the links are there. So make sure you hit us up.
So thank you all for tuning in again, and we hope to see you next week.